Sometimes, facing a harsh truth is better than the torment of not knowing. That's exactly what Maria Leone believed when her 16-year-old daughter vanished without a trace. Initially, everyone clung to the hope that the girl would be found alive. But time went on. Those hopes began to fade. Maria started praying that her daughter would be found, even if she wasn't alive, so she could lay her child to rest properly. Yet, no one anticipated how dreadful the resolution would turn out. The case involving the murder of young schoolgirl Melanie Stacy Amaya shook Colombia with its brutality and shocking outcome. The most horrifying element was that those involved were ordinary teenagers who had recently been romantically linked. Let's delve into this grim story from the beginning to understand how a love-struck boy transformed into a cold-blooded killer who executed his ex-girlfriend. We will also examine any adult oversights and consider whether this tragedy might have been preventable. Who was Melanie Stacy Amaya? Our focus today is on her life and untimely demise. Born on February 21, 2002, in the small town of San Rafael in northern Colombia, she was the eldest daughter in a modest family consisting of Maria Leone and William Amaya. 2 years later, they welcomed another daughter named Natalie. From an early age, both girls were very close-knit, sharing secrets and developing strong bonds with their mother. Melanie showed creative talents early on. She drew beautifully and had an innate passion for cosmetics. She loved painting her dolls' faces along with those of her mother and sister and even friends, declaring she'd become a stylist and makeup artist someday. Academically gifted, too, she did well at school, where teachers described her as talented and driven, qualities which made her both sociable and friendly. She could light up any room. Naturally charismatic, it wasn't surprising that Melanie had many friends inside and outside school. Her attractive appearance garnered attention, aided by her adept use of cosmetics. But life took a hard turn. When Melanie turned 14, her parents filed for divorce but managed to separate amicably while keeping warm relations intact. Her father kept close ties with his daughters, offering both financial support and active involvement in their lives. About 6 months later, Maria started dating a man named Ruben Morales, whom she soon married. Following their wedding, the family relocated to Medellin, a major city in Colombia. Here, Ruben had secure employment, and the girls found ample opportunities for education and personal growth. The stepfather developed an excellent relationship with his teenage stepdaughters. He readily invested in their education and hobbies, ensuring the girls enjoyed a more comfortable life. Treating them as his own daughters, he surrounded them with care and attention. During high school, Melanie began exhibiting a challenging, somewhat rebellious nature. She became seriously interested in music and even contemplated leaving school to focus solely on this passion. Dreaming of becoming a DJ, she requested a mixing desk for her birthday. Additionally, she had several large tattoos on her arms, back, chest, and leg, bold and brightly colored. Her parents did not impede her quest for self-expression, but were shocked upon discovering that Melanie experimented with illegal substances. Beneath her unconventional behavior and appearance experiments was an individual who ultimately led to her demise. On her 14th birthday in 2016, Melanie decided to host a party inviting all her friends along with a DJ. Lacking funds for hiring a professional musician, but receiving contact information from acquaintances, Melanie reached out to 16-year-old Miguel Angel Perea, an aspiring yet talented disc jockey. After some deliberation, the birthday girl decided to call him. Miguel proved exceptionally talented and possessed notable charisma. He captivated young Melanie completely. Then, after celebrating her birthday, they continued communicating. Within weeks, the teenagers were frequently seen together, strolling through parks or around the city streets. Melanie introduced him as her boyfriend. They quickly became inseparable while displaying mutual affection, holding hands tenderly, demonstrating their feelings openly wherever they went. Miguel came from quite modest, or rather poor, means but treated his young girlfriend respectfully and admirably, captivated by both respect and awe. He was genuinely almost instantly charming when meeting her parents, earning acceptance, fostering no interference, and supporting the relationship. Over time, he increasingly spent more time at the residence, integrating into the family dynamic. Miguel once confided in the girl's parents about difficulties at home. His mother disapproved of his involvement in music lessons, leading to a conflict that ended with him being physically harmed and subsequently evicted from his home. Maria offered him shelter temporarily until things could stabilize, not realizing the potential implications of introducing a disruptive influence into their family environment. Consequently, Melanie and Miguel began cohabitating. Initially, they experienced a harmonious period lasting 6 months, during which both teenagers appeared elated by their newfound togetherness. However, as time progressed, Miguel revealed aspects of his character that had an adverse impact on Melanie. Her academic performance deteriorated noticeably. Her behavior and appearance became increasingly provocative. Additionally, she started adorning herself with tattoos and expressed intentions to abandon school. With time, disagreements between the couple became frequent. While they initially attempted to resolve these conflicts outside the family home, such disputes eventually occurred openly within it. A significant concern for Maria arose upon discovering that her eldest daughter was involved in illegal substance use supplied by Miguel. In response to this revelation, Maria initiated a serious conversation with Melanie, who admitted tearfully to limited experimentation with drugs and promised never to engage in such behavior again. Despite deciding it was best for Miguel to leave due to his negative influence on their daughter, Melanie intervened on his behalf, assuredly promising improved conduct for both herself and Miguel moving forward. Reluctantly acquiescing after some deliberation proved to be another misstep for Maria and Ruben, as troubling signs soon emerged. Unexplained bruises on their daughter's body were evident, but consistently attributed by Melanie to either sports activities or clumsiness, rather than implicating her boyfriend's actions. 6 months later, a significant incident occurred. During a heated argument, Miguel assaulted the girl so severely that she needed medical attention. Maria wanted to file a police report for assault and bodily harm, but Melanie discouraged her, stating she would deny everything and refuse to accuse her partner. Melanie's parents tried to separate the couple and forbid them from living together. However, Melanie threatened to run away with him if their relationship was obstructed in any manner. This toxic relationship persisted for over 2 years until Melanie recognized it was detrimental to her well-being. In early May 2018, another intense quarrel erupted between the teenagers, escalating into physical violence. This time, Melanie took initiative and told Miguel their relationship was over. She demanded he pack his belongings and leave her home immediately, or she would contact the police about the abuse she endured. Miguel complied with her demands, but later asked for forgiveness. Despite this, he could not let go emotionally. Miguel began stalking Melanie, tracking her movements and monitoring whom she interacted with, and he regularly called and messaged her. His messages ranged from declarations of love and apologies to death threats. Concerned about this obsessive behavior, Ruben sought a restraining order against Miguel for the safety of his stepdaughter. Nevertheless, law enforcement dismissed his concerns, seeing no threat in what they perceived as teenage drama. Maria also reached out to the prosecutor's office, citing potential danger posed by Miguel. However, authorities did not take her seriously either. They assumed incorrectly that an 18-year-old young man wouldn't harm his ex-partner, a belief rooted in unfamiliarity with his true nature. Mysterious disappearance of a schoolgirl. Almost 2 months had passed since the couple's separation. Miguel seemed to have calmed down and was no longer looking for meetings with Melanie. The girl lived her old life. Her grades at school improved noticeably. She met with friends and practiced music. Her parents also no longer had reason to worry. They tried to cross out their daughter's former boyfriend from their memory and forget him like a bad dream. On June 28, 2018, Melanie was excited to attend a birthday party for her close friend. The event was scheduled to take place at one of the city's most popular nightclubs. To ensure she looked stunning, Melanie meticulously prepared herself by selecting an outfit, applying makeup, and styling her hair. Once she felt ready, she said goodbye to her mother and assured her she'd be back not too late before leaving in a waiting cab. Maria trusted her daughter's friends well enough not to worry excessively. However, The next morning brought concern when Maria realized that Melanie had not returned home. She attempted to contact Melanie, but discovered that her phone was turned off, a distressing sign. Despite this, she tried to stay calm by telling herself that the teenagers might have simply lost track of time and that Melanie's phone battery could be dead. Around lunchtime, Maria called the friend and was shocked to hear that Melanie never arrived at the party. None of their friends had seen or heard from her either. Frantic with worry, Maria began calling all of Melanie's friends and classmates. Unfortunately, no one could provide any useful information about her whereabouts since she left the house. In response, Maria promptly contacted William, Melanie's father, and he rushed over immediately. Together with Ruben, the stepfather, they went to file a missing persons report at the police station. However, they encountered bureaucratic indifference as authorities noted that it is necessary to wait 24 hours and suggested that Melanie might just be asleep at a friend's place post-party. Refusing to waste precious time waiting passively for answers, the parents, along with Ruben, decided on taking swift action themselves. They mobilized relatives and friends in their search efforts by contacting all known acquaintances and visiting familiar places where she might have gone, while also distributing hundreds of flyers around the city, hoping for leads on Melanie's location. Dominique Ellen Dunn was born on November 23, 1959, in Santa Monica, California. She was the youngest child of Ellen, known to most as Lenny, a ranching heiress, and Dominique, who was a writer, actor, and producer. Her parents were divorced just a few years after Dominique was born but remained great friends, and Dominique stayed incredibly close to both of them. Her family had a lot of ties to the entertainment industry, and it came as no surprise when Dominique took an interest in performing herself. After graduating and taking time to travel, she began studying acting and booked roles in well-known stage shows, including West Side Story, The Mousetrap, and My Three Angels. Within weeks of moving to Hollywood, she landed her first big role in the 1979 television film Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker. She then went on to get supporting roles in various episodes of popular 80s television series such as Fame, Family, and Heart to Heart. She booked a recurring role in the comedy television drama series Breaking Away and went on to appear in several other television films. Her career was starting to thrive. By 1981, she had quite an extensive acting resume, and this led to her being cast in her first big feature film, the supernatural horror hit Poltergeist, playing Dana Freeling. The film went on to become a sensation and grossed over $70 million at the box office. The role cemented her place in pop culture, and she quickly became a well-known face with a lot of acting work being sent her way. After the success of Poltergeist, she was cast as Robin Maxwell in a pilot episode for the TV miniseries V. Tragically, she would never complete filming on the highly anticipated show. Dominique's versatility and capabilities as an actress were apparent very early on. Steven Spielberg, the producer of Poltergeist who worked very closely with her, said of Dominique that she was a treasure of natural ability. In 1981, Dominique met a sous chef named John Thomas Sweeney at a private party. 7 years her senior, Sweeney was an established chef and worked at Mar Maison, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Los Angeles, which was frequented by many famous faces. Sweeney's upbringing couldn't have been further from that of Dominique's. His father was an unemployed alcoholic who frequently beat his mother, and his mother worked as a waitress trying to support her family as best she could. When Sweeney was 14, his parents divorced, and he set about making plans to move out of Pennsylvania and start a new life. He focused on being a chef and said that this dream was his ticket out of his old life. A matter of weeks after the pair met, they moved into a one-bedroom West Hollywood home together. However, the relationship quickly began to deteriorate due to Sweeney's jealous and controlling behavior. He stopped her from seeing friends and frequently tried to get her to quit her flourishing career in a bid to prevent her from meeting new people. The couple rode and fought frequently, and it wasn't long before Sweeney became physically abusive. Dominique appeared in an episode of Hill Street Blues, playing a teenage mother who was the victim of parental abuse. The makeup team applied nothing to her face, as shockingly, all of the cuts and bruises were real and had been caused by Sweeney in the days before the shoot. Her family, although polite and welcoming towards Sweeney, felt uncomfortable in his presence. They all commented on the fact that it was very obvious that Sweeney was far more obsessed with the relationship than Dominique was. Her mother Ellen would later recall the first time she realized her daughter was in grave danger. She said, "She came over here one night and she was weeping. She said, 'Oh, Sweeney has such a terrible temper. He smashes furniture and throws dishes.' And I said, 'Dominique, that is frightening.' I've never forgotten her answer. She said, 'Oh, he'd never hurt me.'" According to a source, in August 1982, Sweeney pulled handfuls of her hair out by the roots. Dominique ran to her mother's house trying to escape, and Ellen found her curled up on the floor in the fetal position, cradling her head. Sweeney followed her to the house and started banging on the doors and windows, demanding they let him in. A few days later, however, Dominique returned to the home she shared with Sweeney, and the pair resumed their relationship. During another fight on September 26, 1982, Sweeney grabbed Dominique by the throat and threw her to the floor. He then proceeded to strangle her. A friend who was staying with the couple heard what he described as loud gagging sounds. He ran into the room where he saw Dominique being attacked. Sweeney denied any wrongdoing and told Dominique to come back to bed, seemingly playing it off as one big misunderstanding. Dominique snuck out of the bedroom window and ran to her car. When Sweeney heard her start the engine, he chased her down and jumped on the car bonnet. She turned the engine off until Sweeney got down from the hood, and as soon as he did this, she sped off into the night. She stayed at the home of a friend for the next few days, and her mother stayed with her too. After this terrifying incident, she phoned Sweeney and ended the relationship. He moved out of the house they shared, and Dominique had the locks changed before she moved back in herself. Tragically, a little over a month later, Dominique Dunn would be dead. On October 30th, 1982, just a few weeks after the pair had ended their relationship, Dominique was rehearsing for her latest project, V, at her West Hollywood home. She was running lines alongside actor David Packer. Dominique took a break to talk with a friend on the phone when she suddenly realized the phone call had been broken into. Sweeney had got the operator to break into the conversation to listen to her, and Dominique said to her friend, "Oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone." At around 9 p.m., Dominique and David heard a loud banging at the front door. Sweeney had been drinking martinis at the Marmizone bar and decided to walk to the house. Sweeney refused to leave unless Dominique came out to talk to him, so she headed out, leaving David Packer inside, and went to speak with Sweeney through the locked door. After a few minutes, she agreed to talk to him on the porch. It wasn't long before an argument between the two began. David Packer recalled hearing smacking sounds followed by 2 screams and then a thudding sound. He phoned the police straight away but was diverted to the wrong police area. He was told that Dominique's house was outside of that particular department's jurisdiction. Packer then phoned a friend and warned him that if he was found dead, John Sweeney would be his killer. Packer left the home through the back door and headed for the driveway, where he saw Sweeney kneeling over Dominique's body by some bushes. Sweeney told David Packer to call the police. Fortunately, this call did connect properly, and when the police arrived, Sweeney put his hands in the air and said, "I killed my girlfriend and I tried to kill myself." Dominique was unconscious and transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where she was instantly placed on life support. She remained in a deep coma, and scans showed that she had no brain activity due to oxygen deprivation. When her father Dominic was allowed to see his daughter, he was met with an agonizing sight. Dominique's eyes were wide open, her head had been shaved, and she had a screw in her skull to relieve pressure on her brain. Dominic could see the strangle marks on her neck. Sweeney testified to police that while he remembered arguing with Dominique, he couldn't remember what had happened that led him to attacking her. He said after the verbal argument, all he could recall was being on top of her with his hands around her neck. He said he just exploded and lunged towards her. John Sweeney was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. 5 days later, on November 4th, her parents made the unbearably painful decision to consent to her being taken off life support, and Dominique was pronounced dead. It was just weeks before she would turn 23 years old. Her mother Ellen requested that Dominique's kidneys and heart be donated to transplant centers. Her kidneys were donated to 2 people who were at the hospital at the same time as her, and her heart was sent to a hospital in San Francisco. The family all agreed that this is what Dominique would have wanted, to help save someone else's life. Dominique's funeral was held 2 days later at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills. The funeral was packed. As well as friends and family, celebrities had turned up to pay their respects too. She was laid to rest near her Poltergeist co-star Heather O'Rourke, who had lost her life aged just 12 years old, and actress Natalie Wood, who was a good friend of Ellen and one of Dominique's heroes. After Dominique died, Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder, which he pled not guilty to. He was also charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm and was held on $150,000 bail. Dominique's appearance in the episode of Hill Street Blues aired on November 18, 1982, just 2 weeks after her death. The episode was dedicated to her in the opening credits. Sweeney's trial began in August of 1983 and was presided over by Judge Burton S. Katz. Little did anyone know this would go down in history as one of the most controversial trials. Sweeney took the stand in his own defense. Patrick Terrell, the owner of Marmaison, described Sweeney as a very dependable young man and said he would personally obtain the best legal representation he could for him. However, Sweeney was given a court-appointed attorney named Michael Adelson, a criminal defense attorney who was notoriously tough. During the trial, Sweeney said that when he had turned up at Dominique's home that day, they had worked things out and were going to start afresh. He claimed that they were planning on moving back in together and there were even talks of marriage and children. He claimed that on the night of October 30th, Dominique Dunn had abruptly changed her mind about resuming the relationship and that she had been lying to him and leading him on. At that point, Sweeney said he exploded and lunged at her. He still maintained that he had no recollection of attacking her, but stopped when he realized that she was no longer breathing. Sweeney said he had attempted to revive her by making her walk around the driveway, but she soon fell onto the floor. He then claimed he had tried to give her CPR, which caused her to vomit. Sweeney said that he too had vomited and ran inside the house and consumed 2 whole bottles of pills in an attempt to take his own life. The police disputed this and said there was no evidence to suggest this had actually happened. Sweeney said he then went back out to the driveway where Dominique was lying and lay down beside her. He said he had tried to help by pulling her tongue out of her throat, something he said he used to do for his epileptic father. Michael Adelson said that Sweeney's actions were not premeditated and that he had acted out of a crime of passion, which was provoked by Dominique's alleged lies about a reconciliation. Dominique's family strenuously denied these claims and said that she was well and truly done with their relationship. A letter written by Dominique addressed to Sweeney was read out. It said, "The whole thing has made me realize how scared I am of you, and I don't just mean physically. I'm afraid of the next time you are going to have another mood swing." Deputy Frank DiMiglio was the first officer to arrive on scene, and he testified that Sweeney said to him, "Man, I blew it. Killed her. I didn't think I choked her that hard. But I don't know. I just kept on choking her. I just lost my temper and blew it again." The medical examiner determined that she had been strangled for at least 3 minutes. Police and prosecutors quickly dismissed the heat of passion defense, as they believed that given the fact she was choked for at least 3 minutes, this left a lot of time for Sweeney to regain control of himself and stop what he was doing. But instead, he continued to carry out the vicious and prolonged attack. The prosecution called one of Sweeney's ex-girlfriends, Lillian Pierce, to the stand. At the request of Sweeney's legal team, Lillian did not testify in the jury's presence. Michael Adelson requested that Judge Katz rule her testimony inadmissible, as it was, in his words, prejudicial. Judge Katz granted this request, and the jury would never learn of Lillian's statements. Lillian said that she and Sweeney had dated on and off for around 3 years, and that he had assaulted her on 10 occasions. She said she had been hospitalized twice for her severe injuries. During one of these attacks, Lillian sustained a perforated eardrum, a collapsed lung, and a broken nose. During her testimony, Sweeney became so angry, he jumped up from his seat and ran towards the door leading into the judge's chambers. He had to be subdued by 2 court bailiffs and 4 armed guards. After this outburst, they were forced to handcuff him to his chair. Through tears, he apologized, and Judge Katz accepted his words and moved on with the trial. Although Sweeney frequently cried, resulting in the trial being postponed until he was calm again, the Dunn family were told to show no emotion. At the behest of Adelson, Judge Katz stated that as well as Lillian's testimony, he refused to allow testimonies from both Dominique's friends and her mother Ellen. He ruled their statements about Sweeney's abuse as nothing more than hearsay. It was one devastating blow after another for Dominique's friends and family. Michael Adelson requested that Judge Katz rule that the evidence presented was insufficient to prove first-degree murder, as there was no proof of predetermination. Judge Katz granted this request and instructed jurors they were only allowed to consider charges of either manslaughter or second-degree murder. Dominique's family were devastated. On September 21, 1983, after an arduous 8 days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. Sweeney was sat with his hands clasped around a Bible and nodded towards the jury as the verdict was read out. When Judge Katz told the jury they could leave as justice had been served, Dominique's father shouted, "Not for our family." Dominique accused Judge Katz of purposely withholding Lillian's testimony from the jury, which could have helped establish Sweeney's incredibly violent history with women. Media outlets quickly picked up on the outcome, and Judge Katz received immense criticism for his handling of the trial. People felt that his rulings always clearly favored the defense, and a victims' rights group founded by actress Teresa Saldana called Victims for Victims marched outside the courtroom in protest. A local Los Angeles TV station did a poll which saw Judge Katz voted fourth worst judge in Los Angeles County. In November, Sweeney was sentenced. He received 6 years in prison, which was the maximum penalty possible for the charge, and he would only serve 3.5 of those years. Dominique spoke at length about the trial and his feelings towards Judge Katz. He said, "Our family has never favored Judge Katz's charms, not even to the point of simple courtesies. For 7 weeks, he mispronounced Dominique's name, insistently calling her by my name, Dominique. People wandered in and out of the courtroom. Lawyers for other cases chatted with the clerk or used the bailiff's telephone. At the sentencing, in a shock twist, Judge Katz actually criticized the jury's ruling of manslaughter, claiming he didn't agree with it. Katz stated he felt Dominique's death was a case pure and simple of murder with malice. He went on to say, "I am convinced that John Sweeney did not kill Dominique Dunn in the heat of passion, but rather that he killed her because his ego could not stand rejection." The jury's foreman, Paul Spiegel, told the media that he and other jurors were shocked by the criticism from Katz and referred to his comments as a cheap shot. Spiegel felt that the criticism did not stem from the verdict itself but came off the back of the criticism that Katz himself had received from the media and the public. Spiegel also went on to say that had the jury heard all the evidence and been presented with everything, they would have convicted John Sweeney of the murder of Dominique Dunn. A year after Dominique's murder, her mother Ellen founded Justice for Homicide Victims, a victims' rights organization. Her work with this would see her recognized by President George H.W. Bush. Dominique's father also threw himself into work and activism. He started keeping a journal during the trial, and those writings were published in a March 1984 issue of Vanity Fair. It was titled Justice, a father's account of the trial of his daughter's killer. After this, Dominique began covering and reporting on many high-profile cases, such as the Menendez brothers and O.J. Simpson. Dominique said of Sweeney that, "Maybe the law will let him go. I'm not going to let him go." And Dominique stayed true to his word. After his release from prison in 1987, Sweeney went straight back into working as a chef and was hired by the Chronicle, an upscale restaurant in Santa Monica. This job would not last long, however. Dominique's family started handing out flyers that said, "The food you ate tonight was cooked by the hands that killed Dominique Dunn." As the protest showed no sign of stopping, Sweeney left the Chronicle and fled the Los Angeles area. It wasn't until the mid-90s that the Dunn family would hear Sweeney's name again. Dominique was contacted by a doctor in Florida who had read his article in Vanity Fair. The doctor said that his daughter had gotten engaged to a chef named John Sweeney and wanted to know if it was the same man, which it was. Dominique's brother Griffin contacted the woman in an attempt to get her to break off the engagement. After this, Sweeney moved away from the area again, claiming he was being harassed. He changed his name to John Moorer. Dominic Dunne admitted to having Sweeney followed and tracked and talked of this freely on an episode of CNN's Larry King Live. He said that the utter injustice of Sweeney's sentence drove him almost crazy. He spoke about a woman who was now in her 80s and who had been a member of the jury during Sweeney's trial. She had written to him expressing how sorry she was and that the verdict was bothering her and she needed to clear it up before she died. Dominic was incredibly touched by her words. After many years, her father said he didn't want to waste his life filled with anger and that he no longer wanted to spend every waking moment keeping tabs on Sweeney. The last that appears to be publicly known about John Moorer is that he was residing in San Rafael, California, working as the director of food services for Smith Ranch Homes, a retirement community. Dominique's family worked tirelessly to keep her name and memory alive and to draw as much attention to their daughter's case as possible. Her brother Griffin still works with the Justice for Homicide Victims group. Her family's activism and constant fight for justice will never be forgotten. Dominique Dunne was a bright, gifted, and warm-hearted 22-year-old. She was at the beginning of her life and undoubtedly had so much more to give and achieve. On June 1, 2011, the Waller family's life took a turn. A woman named Jackie contacted her sister Cheryl, informing her that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay. Jackie planned to return home later that day. However, she never came back, nor did she make any further contact. Worried and unable to reach Jackie, Cheryl became increasingly anxious. By around 7 p.m., Cheryl decided to drive to the police station. Here, she made a startling statement, claimed that Clay Waller had killed her sister. The police officers found this accusation shocking, since Jackie had only called a few hours earlier, and there hadn't been any immediate cause for concern or reason to believe she was in danger at that time. Despite the unusual nature of Cheryl's assertion, it eventually became apparent that her instincts were correct. Jackie was indeed entangled in a troubling situation. So what exactly happened to Jackie? And why was Cheryl so convinced her sister had been murdered by her ex-husband even before Jackie was declared missing? Jackie was known for being sweet, kind, and caring. When she met Clay, there was an instant connection between them. Clay had a speech impediment that had subjected him to ridicule by others. This made him feel awkward and uncomfortable in social situations. However, unlike others, Jackie didn't ridicule him. Instead, she defended him and ensured he wasn't hurt by people's unkind remarks. Jackie's nature was all about protecting the vulnerable, fighting injustice, and helping everyone around her. It wasn't long before their bond grew stronger and they got married. At the time of their marriage, both were about 30 years old and aspired to have a large family. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, where Jackie began creating a family nest. She had a successful career. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said about Clay. His life consisted of numerous failures and he struggled with holding down any job for long periods. As a result, Jackie became the primary breadwinner of the family. She always dreamed of having children, but faced challenges in conceiving naturally. Determined to become a mother, though, she underwent fertility treatments, commonly referred to as ECO. So when Jackie discovered she was pregnant, with triplets no less, her joy knew no bounds. The family included 2 girls, Abai and Addison, plus 1 boy, Maddox. It was incredibly challenging for the woman to care for 3 children at once. Nonetheless, she did not complain. She continued to shoulder all responsibilities by herself without relying on her husband. He seemed uninterested in the children. At that time, took a job with the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife cared for the children. However, he didn't stay long. He was fired after a year. Only Jackie's parents and sister provided assistance with the children, allowing her some respite. When Clay lost his job, Jackie took on work to support the entire family. Even after their children were born, Clay did not change his behavior and showed little interest in either his family or work. Occasionally, he engaged in part-time work that didn't bring in the expected income. Clay seemed comfortable, living off his wife's hard work. She worked 40 hours a week and managed the household simultaneously. Jackie's career progressed rapidly. She soon secured a management position at an insurance company branch. This advancement further relaxed Clay's attitude toward financial responsibility. Instead of appreciating his wife's efforts, Clay mistreated her in various ways. He insulted her frequently, called her worthless, and demeaned her value by stating no one wanted her. His infidelities and abusive actions caused significant distress. Jackie's parents and sister were deeply troubled by Clay's behavior and urged her to divorce him. However, Jackie was reluctant to take such a drastic step at that time and tried to salvage their marriage. Every day brought diminishing hope that their relationship could be saved. Over the next few years, financial difficulties compounded their problems, because Clay was not working while Jackie's salary could no longer cover all expenses for their large family. Mounting mortgage debts led to their house being foreclosed upon. The woman decided it was time to move in with sister, seizing upon the opportunity. Her husband then relocated to a friend's place. At this point, their children were a bit older. Jackie faced the tough, yet necessary choice to file for divorce. She believed she and her kids deserved a better life. When Jackie brought this up with her husband, Clay seemed calm initially. However, he soon changed his stance and refused the divorce. His threats started subtly, but gradually escalated into direct threats against her life. He warned that divorcing him would be like signing a death warrant for herself and their children. These threats terrified Jackie, yet she remained resolute. Living under such conditions was no longer an option for her, so she sought ways to end her marriage with Clay. She turned to her family, sharing the troubling behaviors of her husband, and began keeping a diary to document his actions. Jackie also noticed that Clay was stalking her. For the sake of safety, she and her children moved in with her sister during this period. Her kids were only 5 years old and didn't understand the situation fully. Nonetheless, Jackie explained that their current living arrangement was crucial. Time passed, and things began to stabilize as the divorce process neared its conclusion. It appeared that Clay had come to terms with their separation and ceased his harassment towards Jackie. They even started forming new relationships on the side. Jackie allowed Clay visitation rights with their children, and disputes between them reduced significantly. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jackie agreed to meet at the attorney's office to finalize the last aspects of their divorce. On that day, their son, Maddox, was visiting his father while Jackie's other children stayed with Cheryl, Jackie's sister. After the meeting at the attorney's office, Jackie planned to pick up Maddox from Clay's house before heading back to Cheryl's place. Leaving the office, Jackie telephoned her sister Cheryl to report that everything had gone smoothly and mentioned she was on her way to collect Maddox from Clay's residence before returning home. That conversation would be their last. Jackie gradually lost touch. As time passed, her sister became increasingly anxious and started calling Jackie, but there was no answer. She then tried calling Clay, but he didn't respond either. Cheryl began to suspect that Clay had done something to Jackie. She sent him a text message. "If I don't hear from Jackie in 5 minutes, I'm going to the police." Almost immediately called back asking what was wrong. Cheryl responded firmly, stating that she believed he knew exactly what was happening. Clay asserted he didn't know where Jackie was and mentioned he would instruct her to call Cheryl when he saw her. However, Cheryl wasn't convinced. She took her sister's children to their parents' house and filed a police report personally. Despite initial skepticism about Clay's involvement in Jackie's disappearance, the detectives took her concerns seriously. They didn't make her wait for 24 hours before investigating further. Instead, they pried to contact Jackie's ex-husband for any leads on her whereabouts. When questioned, 41-year-old Clay informed them that he had lunch with Jackie. They subsequently went to the attorney's office to discuss some aspects of their divorce, and then drove together to his house for further discussions. He claimed that after chatting for a while, he left for the store. Upon his return, Jackie's car was gone. He assumed she had departed. Clay added that his son, Maddox, was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and insisted Jackie was aware of it. According to him, Jackie wasn't there for her son, but merely to talk about other matters with Clay. However, Cheryl found his statements implausible and inconsistent with what she knew. Jackie made it known that her visit to Clay's house was solely for seeing her son. She had no intention of discussing anything else with him, especially given that she wouldn't have allowed her son to be far away with another woman. Noting these discrepancies, Cheryl managed to convince the investigators that Clay's account lacked credibility and suggested he might be concealing crucial information about Jackie's disappearance. In light of this new perspective provided by Cheryl, investigators were now treating the case more urgently as both the missing person and her car remained unaccounted for. A comprehensive search was launched for Jackie a few hours after her disappearance. Investigators heard her Honda Pilot on an interstate highway with a flat tire, but there were no signs of an accident. The tire appeared punctured intentionally, making the scene look staged. The car was open and empty, with a few blood stains on the back seat, but no other clues indicating her whereabouts. These disturbing details hinted at a possible attack and kidnapping. The search effort for Jackie was concentrated in the vicinity where her car was found. Numerous volunteers, including police officers, rescue squads with dogs, and family members participated in the search. They came from various parts of the region responding to requests from Jackie's relatives. Despite the unbearable heat, many were willing to help locate her. Jackie's family announced a reward of $3,500 for information about her whereabouts. Despite their efforts, including extensive searches and public appeals for assistance, the search yielded no results for several days. Police began to scrutinize Clay, Jackie's ex-husband, more closely. When they visited his house to speak with him again, he recounted the same story as before, but refused access to his home and car. He promptly hired a lawyer who asserted his rights. For days after Jackie's disappearance, Clay left her a voicemail with a distressed tone. "Hi honey, it's Sunday. You went missing on Wednesday. Please call me if you get this message. I don't know where you are and I miss you very much." Detectives later obtained a search warrant and returned to Clay's residence for a thorough inspection. During this inspection, they discovered blood-like stains in his vehicle. Forensic analysis revealed it was fish blood. Clay had deliberately coated the car with fish blood and recorded it on video as a test for forensic experts. In addition to examining the vehicle, investigators noted conspicuous details in Clay's house. A section of carpet had been removed from the floor, leaving an obvious mark. Tiny drops of blood were also found on the walls of the hallway leading to the basement. These findings raised further questions about Clay's involvement and intentions regarding Jackie's disappearance. Traces of furniture rearrangement were evident, signaling that something unusual was happening in the house. Forensics examined under the floorboards and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood samples from the house and the carpet were sent to the laboratory for further examination. Detectives tracked the missing woman's last known movements to 1:10 a.m. She was observed at a drugstore with her ex-husband. The pair appeared composed and normal. Approximately 2 hours later, she was seen at an ATM withdrawing money. After that, Jackie did not reappear on CCTV, although Clay was seen a few hours later with his son and new girlfriend at a toy store. Subsequently, they visited a car wash in their pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. By then, had changed clothes and meticulously washed both the car and the boat. This increased suspicion around him, establishing him as the prime suspect. Investigators released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, requesting eyewitnesses who may have seen them. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River. In response to this request, detectives confirmed this information through an analysis of Clay's cell phone billing records, prompting them to focus search efforts in that area. Despite numerous searches over the large terrain, nothing surfaced directly linking to the missing woman. The forensic results soon arrived, indicating that the drops of blood found in Clay's house indeed belonged to Jackie. The police then operated under the assumption that Jackie was deceased. Detectives called Clay in for questioning and attempted to procure a confession from him regarding Jackie's murder. However, Clay denied all accusations, stating that the blood stains were remnants of an old domestic incident in his kitchen. Without physical remains or definitive proof of death, investigators lacked grounds to arrest or charge him. Despite releasing him from custody, Authorities kept Clay under close surveillance and continued their investigation. Being an ex-deputy sheriff himself, knew they were monitoring him closely and engaged in deceptive maneuvers to elude detection, effectively playing cat and mouse with law enforcement officials. He'd go to deserted vacant lots to mislead the investigation while the entire neighborhood stood by and participated in the search for the missing mother of 3. Clay continued to bully and taunt them. He would drive past the search party or Jackie's family, insult them, give them the middle finger and shout that they were wasting their time and wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more suspicions and questions. Meanwhile, the missing woman's sister Cheryl fought in court for custody of the triplets. She feared the children would go to a father who was a danger. His erratic behavior backfired on him and Cheryl got custody. This enraged him and he began threatening his ex-wife's sister with violence, including writing about it on social media. The woman recorded these threats and contacted police. Detectives seized the opportunity and arrested Clay nearly 5 months after Jackie's disappearance. He was charged with threats to life which he accepted, but claimed he wrote out of anger and despair at losing custody of his beloved children. Clay insisted he didn't plan anything bad against Cheryl. He viewed himself as a victim in this situation. While investigating this incident with his sister, police found out he had other charges pending against him, stealing $50,000 from a previous employer as well as stalking a man. Detectives pressed his former co-worker, hoping Clay would confess to killing his ex-wife and lead them to her body, but it was futile. Clayton continued to deny all charges regarding Jackie's disappearance. Instead of confessing to the crime, he started claiming confidently that he knew who was behind his ex-wife's death, a man named Harry. But detectives had already checked this lead thoroughly. Harry had an ironclad alibi that eliminated him from suspicion. All evidence pointed only to Clay, yet he kept denying it. He ended up going to prison for 5 years for threatening Cheryl. While the police locked him up in jail, they continued to investigate Jackie's disappearance. The search for the missing woman continued on Devil's Island, but never yielded any results. Eventually, about 2 years after Jackie's disappearance, the cops gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence, video camera footage, blood in his house, and more. They decided to charge Clay with his ex-wife's murder, even without her body. It was a risky and desperate move because if they lost, the prosecutor's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. After consulting with his accomplices, Clay concluded that it would be best for them to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce the sentence. To do so, the defendant offered to plead guilty to the murder and provide the location of the body. Jackie's family agreed to this deal because it was important to give her a decent burial. Clay led police officers to his ex-wife's body. It was in a secluded spot on a remote sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. At first, he couldn't remember exactly which tree he had buried her under, but then admitted that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her body. One of the policemen, who was an active gardener, explained that large quantities of fertilizer kill trees. They looked around and found 3 dead trees that were of interest to them. They excavated there, and under one of the trees they did find Jackie's body wearing the same clothes she had last been seen in. The woman was identified from dental records as Jackie Waller. Finally, Jackie's loved ones recognized that she was definitely dead and found her body. Then they were able to commit her to the ground. The woman's funeral was held on her parents' golden wedding day. Cheryl told their children that their mom was gone and she had been killed by their father. This event was a great shock to the children because they lost both their mother and father at once. The children developed a deep aversion to and refused to communicate with him henceforth. As part of the agreement, Clay had to officially confess to the murder of his ex-wife and provide specific details. He explained that the initial thoughts of murder began to surface about a year before the tragic event, when Jackie announced their separation. Despite this, he tried to suppress those dark thoughts, as Jackie was the mother of his children. However, he couldn't bear the idea of her taking his children away. He warned Jackie that such actions would have dire consequences for her, but she didn't heed his warning, which he considered her fault. The night prior to the murder, traveled to a secluded area on Devil's Island to dig a grave for Jackie. According to him, Their divorce proceedings were generally progressing smoothly. On that particular day, after a visit to their lawyer, they had a conversation in which she suggested they engage in intimacy one last time. They then went back to his home where they talked in the kitchen. While looking for a snack in the refrigerator, Clay accidentally raised his head, hitting Jackie and causing her nose to bleed. This incident angered her. She stormed out into the hallway where she smeared blood on the walls and started yelling at him that he would never see his children again. At this point, Clay lost control and attacked her. He hit her in the face with his hand and then strangled her. Subsequently, he took Jackie's body out in a dumpster and buried it in the pre-dug grave. Afterward, he meticulously cleaned out both the car and house, took a shower, changed clothes as if nothing happened, and then went on to meet his new girlfriend and son at a toy store. Throughout this process, claimed that everything was driven by impulse and emotion. He did not originally intend to kill Jackie. This contradicted his earlier statement, claiming he had dug the grave the day before. However, if Clay did not plan to kill the woman, why would he have dug the grave beforehand? It appeared to be premeditated murder. The medical examiner found multiple skull fractures on the deceased, indicating blunt force rather than a simple beating with fists. No one believed his story. Clay, who showed no remorse for killing his ex-wife, felt jubilant at receiving only 20 years in prison for second-degree murder, with the possibility of early release. The prosecutor had another strategy. Clay's testimony about digging the grave buried him further. He had dug the hole in Illinois while the murder occurred in Missouri. These actions fell under the federal law against domestic violence across state lines, and their violation allowed an additional 35 years to be added to his sentence. Clay Waller will be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. It turned out that Clay was unaware of such a law and did not foresee the consequences of his confession. Yet, his atrocities continued. Demonstrating further callousness, he wrote a book detailing Jackie's murder to profit from the tragedy. Sherelle, Jackie's sister, along with her husband, continues to raise Jackie's children with support from their elderly parents. The children have grown up remembering their mother as an exceptional person who remains forever in their hearts. They still harbor anger toward their father and deeply miss their mom. Faith Danielle Hedgepeth was born in Warren County on September 26, 1992. She was a member of the Hale-Wasaponi Native American tribe and was born to parents Connie and Roland. She had 3 siblings, 2 brothers named Caleb and Chad, and a sister Rolanda. Her parents divorced when she was a baby and she was raised by her mother and older sister. Faith adored her parents, and her father Roland said she was the light of his life. Faith had been born at a difficult time in Roland's life when he had been battling addiction, and he said that her being born was the gift from God that gave him a reason to live. She was an honor student and earned herself a Gates Millennium Scholarship to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, majoring in biology. Her father had attended the same university but had dropped out, and Faith was hoping to become the first person in her family to graduate from college. Faith had dreams of becoming either a pediatrician or a teacher, and was described as lively, bubbly, and always looking to give back to people in any way she could. She found the workload at university initially difficult, falling behind in some of her studies. Undeterred and refusing to give up, however, she started working 2 jobs to support herself, changed her major, and threw herself back into obtaining her degree. She lived off campus in an apartment at Hawthorne at the View. She lived on the 2nd floor, room 1502, and lived with her friend since first year, Karina Rosario. As well as living with Karina, known to most as Rosario or Rosie, Karina's boyfriend, Eric Tacoy Jones, also lived there for a time. Eric and Karina's relationship was a volatile one, and they eventually broke up and Eric moved out. He attempted to break into the apartment twice despite Karina changing the locks. Faith eventually drove Karina to court to obtain a protective order against Eric. This order prevented him from coming anywhere near the apartment. However, when he moved out, he moved into another apartment on the same complex, so was still living very close to the girls. September 6, 2012 started as any normal day. Faith attended all of her classes and then went to an event for Alpha Pi Omega. Alpha Pi Omega is the nation's largest and oldest Native American sorority, and Faith was hoping to one day join. She left the event at 7:15 to continue working on a history paper about her tribe. At 8 p.m., she and roommate Karina went to the campus library for more studying. Faith briefly left the library, leaving Karina there, but returned at 11:30 p.m., and both girls made their way back to the apartment at midnight. About half an hour later, they set off to a nightclub called The Thrill, arriving there at 12:40 a.m. The Thrill was well known for letting in under 21s to dance, and it became a popular student hangout. The girls danced for around an hour and a half before Karina said she felt sick and wanted to leave. She and Faith were picked up on security cameras leaving the club at 2:07 a.m. and Faith drove the pair home. Karina said when they got back she was sick due to drinking too much alcohol. A neighbor that lived below the girls recalled hearing banging noises just before 3 a.m. She said it sounded like thumping sounds, almost as if a heavy book bag was being dropped or furniture was being overturned. Around 3:30 a.m., records indicate that there was activity on Faith's Facebook account. 10 minutes later, at 3:40 a.m., a text message was sent from Faith's phone to the phone of Brandon Edwards, an ex-boyfriend of Karina. Some reports have suggested that Brandon was also romantically involved with Faith at one point, while others claim he was more like a big brother figure. The text message read, "Hey B, can you come over here please? Rosario needs you more. Aha, please let her know you care." 3 minutes later, another text was sent from her phone to Brandon, and this one just said the word then. It is thought that Faith was correcting the word aha sent in her previous message, believing the meaning of the original message to be, "Hey B, can you come over here please? Rosario needs you more than you know. Please let her know you care." Brandon replied to the message at 4:16 p.m. the next day asking who it was that was texting him, but he received no text back. Karina's phone records show that she had also been trying to contact Brandon Edwards at the same time. At 3:52 a.m., another message was sent from Faith's phone. This one was to Ty Michael McNeil, Faith's on-again off-again boyfriend whom she had known since the first day of college. An extract of the message read, "I know you're probably sleeping, but I just wanted to let you know that I love you." This appeared to be the last activity on Faith's phone. At 4:25 a.m., Karina got picked up by a friend and UNCH soccer player Jordan McCreary, leaving Faith in the apartment alone. Karina said that she left the front door unlocked and believed that Faith was asleep in bed at the time she left. Jordan drove Karina to his apartment about 5 minutes away where she then stayed. The next morning at 10:30 a.m., Karina phoned Faith, hoping to get a lift home. Faith didn't answer, so Karina called another friend, named Marisol Rangel. Marisol picked Karina up and they headed back to Karina and Faith's apartment, arriving there just before 11 a.m. Seeing Faith's car parked out front, they assumed that she had simply overslept and missed her classes. They entered room 1502 and began calling out Faith's name, to which they got no response. When they headed into the bedroom, they found a truly horrific sight. Faith's partially naked body was discovered on the floor leaning up against her bed and covered in a duvet. Her t-shirt was pulled up and over her face and she had no clothes on from the waist down. The blood in the room was widespread, covering the walls, floor, and wardrobe, and a used tampon was found near her body. Faith had been bludgeoned to death, and an autopsy later revealed that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her face was covered in cuts and her body had been badly beaten. There were no signs of a forced entry, and unfortunately there was no surveillance footage from around the complex to determine anyone coming in or out. Karina Rosario made the call to 911. Further analysis found semen on Faith's body, but it remains undetermined as to whether this was consensual or a sexual assault. The DNA from the semen also matched the DNA found in Faith's bedroom. A pathologist was quoted as saying, "There is no gross trauma to the external genitalia, vagina, or cervix on external examination with a vaginal speculum." Faith's family believed she was raped, and Chapel Hill police believe that it was more likely than not that she was raped. A Bacardi rum bottle was collected as evidence. Tissue fragments and DNA were found on the bottle, and it was thought that this could have been the murder weapon. Next to Faith's body was a handwritten note, written across a timeout fast food bag. said, "I'm not stupid. Bitch. Jealous." Although the blood covered the walls and the floor, the note on the takeout bag was clean. This suggested that the killer had spent time in the apartment after the murder, washing their hands and cleaning themselves before writing the note. Even if the note was written before the murder, the killer would still have had to spend time cleaning themselves off before placing the note in the room. A handwriting analyst, Peggy Waller, said she felt the note was written with what is referred to as disguise, and whoever wrote it was deliberately attempting to change their handwriting. Chapel Hill's chief of police, Chris Blue, said that the murder rate in Chapel Hill equates to less than 1 a year, and Faith's death sparked one of the largest homicide investigations in North Carolina history. Faith's death sent shockwaves through the community, and fear quickly grew among her fellow students. The university held a vigil honoring Faith with a Native American ceremony. Faith's mother Connie said that the family were unable to identify Faith's body, and it would be 2 years before they found out about the note left at the crime scene or were able to read the autopsy report. All of the details surrounding Faith's death were sealed by a judge, and they would remain sealed for 2 years despite being against Chapel Hill Police's usual policy. In November 2012, the university student newspaper The Daily Tar Heel petitioned the judge who had ordered the investigation records to be sealed. They wanted the judge to release an early search warrant in the case. However, the judge ordered that the records be sealed for another 45 days. At this time, 2 months after Faith had been killed, her cause of death had not yet been released to the public. Connie and Roland Hedgepeth told the media that their daughter's death certificate said that she had been beaten to death. In December of 2012, the FBI began assisting the Chapel Hill Police Department in the investigation. They developed a profile of the killer. This profile stated that the murderer knew Faith and may have possibly lived close to her at one time. The FBI also believed that the killer may have been someone that took an unusual interest in the case, possibly talking to people about it and demonstrating behavioral changes. In May 2013, the court extended the seal of the evidence for a following 60 days. Also in this year, Alpha Pi Omega, the sorority that Faith had dreams of getting into, inducted her as an honorary member. In July 2014, the Chapel Hill Police Department released 300 pages of details about the case after a court ordered them to do so. The public and media were finally able to get some understanding of what had happened to Faith Hedgepeth that night. And 2 months later, the autopsy report was released. It confirmed the same as the death certificate, that she had died of blunt force trauma to the head. She was covered in cuts and bruises to her body, as well as having blood under her fingernails, showing she fought hard against her killer. According to court records, search warrants were only issued to 2 apartments, and they were both located at Hawthorne at the View. One was Faith and Karina's, and one was in a separate building. 2 sources have claimed that the woods behind Faith's apartment weren't searched, and it was noted that the officers didn't search any other apartments on the premises, didn't go door to door, and didn't bring sniffer dogs into the area. Another piece of potential evidence came from Faith's phone. On the night she was killed, she had called her friend, Una Chavez, 3 times, and on one of the calls left a voicemail. Una said that Faith was notorious for accidentally calling people and leaving messages that she didn't mean to. The voicemail appears to be unintelligible. People close to Faith said they heard what sounded either like an argument or a fight between Faith and other people. Others hear what simply sounds like the inside of a nightclub at 1:30 in the morning. Her father Roland said he hears his daughter in danger. TV journalist and newspaper columnist Tom Gasparoli started a blog and podcast focused on finding answers for Faith's family. He worked tirelessly to gain more information and share this with the public. He spoke to forensic audio analyst Arlo West and said, "I thought he seemed very credible to me. His transcript I thought was pretty consistent, showing an anger and some sort of verbal assault." Arlo West is the president and CEO of Creative Forensic Services, certified in audio enhancement and has over 30 years of experience in the audio and film industry. He also specializes in pocket dial phone calls and believes he heard some notable things on the tape. He believes he heard 4 voices on the tape, 2 male and 2 female. The following transcript is what Arlo West believes could be being said on the voicemail. The timestamp shows the voicemail was left at 1:23 a.m. This meant that Faith and Karina would have been at the Thrill, and from the CCTV evidence, We know they left the club at 2:07 a.m. By all accounts at this time, everything appeared to be okay. This timestamp has been disputed by some people, including Arlo West. He said, I found with the particular brand of phones Faith and Una had, both had issues with timestamping and voicemails being sent incorrectly at different times. The towers transmitting the cell phone signals were glitchy at best. I believe to a high degree of forensic audio certainty that that timestamp is incorrect. Chapel Hill police agreed to look at West's enhanced audio version and evaluate it themselves. However, due to the timestamp of the message, police do not believe it to be a recording of the murder. Police said that the metadata associated with the call reinforces this too. 2015 marked the third year since Faith's death, and her family, friends, and the community seem no closer to getting any answers. However, a year later in 2016, a sketch of the possible killer was released. Using genetic coding from the DNA at the scene, which acted almost as a blueprint, a company in Virginia were able to predict eye, hair, and skin color, freckling, face morphology, and ancestry of the alleged killer. Each trait comes with a measure of confidence. Using this data, police and the laboratory believe that this could be the face of the killer, although this does not rule out anyone else being involved. According to the image, the suspect is very strongly Native American and European mixed ancestry or Latino. Several people have been looked at quite closely in relation to the case. In the early hours of the morning when Faith and Karina were picked up on camera leaving the club, they were spotted walking out with a male. Police checked all the footage and saw that the man had arrived at the club earlier with 3 other men. They all later provided DNA samples of which none were a match to the crime scene. Karina's ex-boyfriend, Eric Tacoy Jones, was also a heavy focus of the investigation. He reportedly resented Faith for her influence over Karina and felt that she was interfering with their relationship. During a phone call, he allegedly threatened to kill Faith if he could not resume his relationship with Karina. Upon looking at Eric's phone, police found a text that he had sent to a friend. The text was asking them to forgive him for what he was about to do. This message was sent on September 6th, just the day before Faith Hedgepeth was killed. Police also found a similarly worded message to another friend via Twitter. 3 days after Faith was murdered, Eric updated his Facebook to say, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all of my sins and the sins I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and the ones who wish me dead today." Police seized Eric's Jeep and searched his apartment, but said that nothing came up. Police described him as cooperative and said there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him, and his DNA was ultimately ruled out of the crime scene. Eric told news reporters, however, although he was ruled out as a suspect, police believe that Eric does remain a person of interest, as even though the DNA did not belong to him, he may still know whose DNA was in the apartment and on Faith's body. Faith's father, Roland, has always been vocal about his feelings towards Karina. He said, "Think that Karina knows what happened to Faith." Others have expressed their concerns regarding Karina's actions after the murder and about the 911 call she made that morning. People found it strange that not only was Marisol Rangel's name not mentioned, giving the impression that Karina was in the apartment by herself, but also that Faith's name was never uttered in the 8-minute-long phone call. Police said there were things that Karina needed to answer and clear up when it came to the 911 call. Questions as to whether or not Karina was giving the police all the information she knew, and whether that information was entirely truthful. A downstairs neighbor walked into Karina and Marisol just minutes after they had found Faith's body. She said of the encounter, "You would never have guessed the 2 girls had just discovered a crime scene. Certainly a murder. I will never forget that." Marisol was softly crying. Karina was texting. Just texting. People also found it questionable that Karina wanted to leave the club and go home due to feeling unwell, to then exit the apartment just hours later, leaving the door unlocked. The man that picked Karina up that morning, Jordan McCreary, had a roommate who had spoken to the investigating team on the 2018 review of the case. The roommate recalled a conversation being had about a potential speck of red on Karina's clothes when she arrived at the apartment that morning. The roommate said that the police were aware of this and searched the apartment for Karina's shirt. The Chapel Hill police confirmed this account. They said they tested the shirt, but this test was not indicative of Karina committing the crime. They also did not confirm whether the red speck was blood or not. Private investigator Hunter Glass has been working closely with Faith's family, and he also feels that more answers lie with Karina. He believes that an argument between the girls ensued at the Thrill nightclub, possibly to do with jealousy over dating or a relationship which may have led to Faith's death. Karina Rosario moved out of North Carolina and hasn't spoken publicly about the case since. Roland Hedgepeth said she no longer takes his calls. Police sources have said that whenever they have made contact with Karina, she has been cooperative. One of Faith's old roommates, Kira, said that Faith was speaking with her high school sweetheart, Alex, at the same time she was dating Ty Michael McNeil and seemed conflicted about the relationships. Kira said that there always seemed to be some sort of drama with Ty and described him as having obsessive behavior when it came to Faith. She said that Faith had told her Ty had once pushed her into a wall. Faith's friend, Una Chavez, who had received the strange voicemail that night, attested to the same controlling behavior and said that Faith had told her that Ty had hit her. Ty was spoken to as part of the 2018 review of the case and said that he had texted Faith on the morning of September 6th, the evening before she was killed. He asked her if she wanted to hang out later, but he received no reply. It wasn't until around 3:52 a.m. that he got any answer from her phone. Ty believes that this was Faith texting him, but her father Roland isn't so sure and doesn't think this is how his daughter would normally type. Una agreed and didn't feel it was how Faith would talk either. Just days before Faith was killed, she had spoken to Una about wanting to resume her relationship with her high school sweetheart Alex, and this just didn't match up with what she had written in the text to Ty. Did have an alibi for the night of the murder, and he submitted a DNA sample. However, he said he doesn't know if he was given the all-clear by police, or if he simply just didn't hear back from them regarding the sample. Decorated Police Sergeant Derek Lavassa and a forensic psychologist Chris Mahandy were part of the team on the 2018 look into the case. They spoke at length about the theories and people that may have had some potential involvement. Chris Mahandy said, "There's at least 3 or 4 people here that should be considered strong persons of interest. Eric Takeoe Jones, Karina Rosario, and Ty Michael McNeil." The odd social media posts and the text from Eric, the threats he had already made towards Faith alongside the fact he lived very close to the women. Derek Lavassa discussed a theory that Eric Takeoe Jones may have brought someone back to the apartment with him, someone that wasn't as familiar with Faith, and that is potentially who the DNA belongs to. It would have meant that this person may not have been tested yet, because they are removed from Faith's social circle. The strange behavior seen from Karina on the morning Faith died, and the volatile and, according to friends, abusive and controlling relationship that Faith had with Ty. The pair found it odd and concerning that Ty had downplayed the tension and volatility in the relationship, and they also spoke about the text message sent from Faith's phone at 3:52 a.m. Chris Mahandy described the messages as way out of context for what was happening in the relationship at the time, something that Roland Hedgepeth and Una Chavez both agree with. Although nothing can be said for certain, the pair spoke about the lack of microscopic or trace evidence left outside the apartment. Derek Lavassa said, "You know how you could leave that apartment without leaving a single piece of trace evidence? You're not in a rush." He went on to say, "Who would take the chance at staying in an apartment that wasn't theirs to write a note and stage a scene unless they knew nobody was coming back?" Karina is the only person who would know definitively that no one else was coming to the apartment at 4:30 in the morning. She's the only one. Unless there was somebody else there with her, it's possible. The pair, alongside many others, believe Karina probably knows more than she's saying, but they do go on to discuss the seeming lack of motive. If Karina was involved, why on earth would she commit such a crime against someone who was like a sister to her? Ultimately, investigators do not feel this was a random, opportunistic crime committed by a total stranger. They believe it was carried out by someone in Faith's circle and was likely someone she knew through university. Over 2,000 people have been interviewed so far, either as suspects or people with potential information, but nobody has ever been charged. The DNA found at the scene has been compared to hundreds of samples, but sadly, none have been a match. Police say this doesn't entirely eliminate anyone though, as someone may know who the DNA belongs to, or may still be involved with Faith's death somehow. Faith's family are offering a $40,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for Faith's murder. Faith's legacy continues to live on with the Faith Hedgepeth Memorial Scholarship. The scholarship is offered to help Native American women enter higher education. When I found out that I was a recipient of Faith Smile Scholarship, I was honored. I was so overjoyed because not having the means to go to school is a big thing in our Native American community. The murder of Faith Hedgepeth remains an open and active case. The Chapel Hill Police Department welcome any information that anyone may have. The Inman family projected an image of perfect harmony to those on the outside. They were regular churchgoers every Sunday to Warwickport Sing. Yet within their tight-knit circle, one could fathom what really happened behind closed doors. Back in 3, William and Sandra Inman's paths crossed at church. He was 18, she just 16. Their union received their parents' blessing, leading to marriage. The couple made their home in the modest community of Logan. Located in Hawking County, Bill Inman possessed strong religious convictions and balanced his job in construction with playing musical instruments for the Sky of Faith Evangelical Church in Nelsonville, Ohio. Sandra took on the role of managing the household. In 1984, they were delighted to welcome their son, William Jr., to distinguish between father and son. The head of the family was called Bill, while the younger one was known as Will. As time passed, William Jr. grew up. At age 17 in 2001, he met a 15-year-old named Summer Cook at church, quite reminiscent of his parents' encounter. Will and Summer maintained a friendship for 3 years before getting married when Summer turned 18 in 2004. The newlyweds began their life together by residing with Will's parents in a spacious house in Logan, Ohio. In that same year, when Bill reached the age of 39, he envisioned himself as a spiritual guide. Transforming his garage into a makeshift sanctuary, he began hosting gatherings there. Despite local skepticism towards this self-declared minister's actions, his enigmatic garage started to attract neighbors first, then their friends, and more individuals seeking solace through prayer and leaving offerings. By 2005, Will and Summer were overjoyed with the birth of their son Alex. Around this time, financial strains began affecting the Inman household since Bill's religious endeavors were not financially rewarding. This situation led the family to consider relocating to another state in pursuit of better employment opportunities. By 2006, the Inman family had fully resettled in Florida. Both Bill and Will promptly secured employment in hotel construction. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer dedicated themselves to homemaking and nurturing young Alex. 2 years later, the Inmans made their way back to Ohio from Florida. By then, they had forfeited their Logan home due to an inability to reclaim it and settled in a rental in Vinton's countryside. Starting a new chapter shortly after their relocation, in 2008, and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kelly. By 2010, their family grew with the arrival of another daughter, Alana. As young parents, Will and Summer often sought weekends away for relaxation and rejuvenation. During these times, Bill and Sandra, always supportive, took on the role of caring for their grandchildren. The weekends were filled with joy as they cherished moments with their 3 grandchildren. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman secured a pastor's license and proclaimed himself the head of the Skinnier Faith Church. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable entity named Ranch of Mercy to assist the jobless and homeless. His vision was grand. He wanted to construct a large dwelling for orphans and widows. However, financial resources were quite lacking. To address this issue, Bill conceived a lottery scheme. Each participant would purchase a ticket with proceeds earmarked for building the shelter. The grand prize was either a house or $200,000 plus 99 other significant rewards. The community became aware of this lottery through news and advertisements. Bill initially promoted it door to door, assuring participants of lavish rewards while emphasizing that surplus funds were destined for providing a haven for the destitute. Priced at $10 per ticket, Bill managed to sell 100,000 tickets, amassing $1 million for the project. The drawing was set for September 2010. In June 2010, personal upheaval struck the Inman family when Summer expressed her desire to divorce Will after 6 years of marriage. This declaration came not long after she had penned a significant entry in her personal diary. I am utterly exhausted from constantly trying to please everyone around me. Do not deserve happiness. Do I not have the right to love someone and feel that love in return? I'm uncertain if now is the appropriate time, but I feel compelled to share everything with Will. Troubles me deeply, yet he deserves to know the truth. He should be aware that I no longer wish to be with him. I need to be alone to rediscover myself and understand my current identity. At this moment, I feel like a servant, perpetually running around and obeying others' commands. I adore my children with all my heart and would never trade them for anything. However, I don't want them to grow up witnessing their mother merely following orders all the time. I'm unsure how Will might react to this revelation. There's a chance he could become angry, attempt to take the children away, or worse, resort to threats or harm. It's important for our children to see us as equals. I'm aware that Will's parents might turn against me and try to convince me to stay, but such actions won't change anything. Last night, when Will asked me what I wanted, my mind was blank. All I could think of was what I don't want. I don't want to feel unhappy and trapped any longer, but I couldn't bring myself to voice these thoughts. So instead, I sat there in silence. Every day feels like a battle. All I yearn for is rest, to cry and sleep without interruption. But finding a way out of the situation seems impossible at times. My hope is that by the time of my next journal entry, I'll have clarity on how to resolve everything. As the summer progressed, we moved forward with the divorce proceedings. Departing from the Inman residence, I took our son and both daughters along with my personal belongings. We sought refuge at my parents' home. Wanting not to disrupt the children's relationship with their father or grandparents, visits were scheduled regularly for them. 2 months following our separation in August 2010, I began a relationship with Adam Peters while also securing employment at a bank in Logan's downtown area, working in a cleaning capacity due to limited educational background. When September arrived, it marked another significant event, the Ranch of Mercy's house raffle, spearheaded by the Inman family. Although construction on the prize house was supposed to begin, both September and October passed without any progress. No raffle took place, and no explanations were given. The organization didn't seem to rush to refund participants either. By December 1st, 2010, the Inmans got a notice requiring them to leave their rented residence due to significant unpaid rent. In response, Summer and Adam went to collect her remaining belongings from the Inman home. However, they were denied entry. This led Summer to call the police, reporting that her estranged husband was intimidating her and preventing her from retrieving her possessions. When the police arrived, and his parents continued to block access, Will even escalated matters by threatening Adam and clashing with an officer. Consequently, Summer filed a legal complaint against Will. She reflected on their relationship, recalling how idyllic it seemed before marriage, but lamenting its drastic change afterward. Will's behavior reportedly became very controlling, affecting everything from her diet to household responsibilities and even intimate aspects of their life. She wasn't allowed to sleep without his approval and was confined at home without access to her phone or keys. Summer revealed Will's aspirations for a large family, his interest in polygamy, and his activities on related websites, including posting inappropriate images. She also disclosed threats he made if she pursued divorce, and mentioned how her cats mysteriously disappeared, attributed their disappearance nonchalantly to them escaping through an open window. Following Summer's allegations, Will provided his version of events. He justified taking Summer's phone and keys by suggesting he suspected her of infidelity. Regarding the cats, he said that due to their wild behavior and damage caused to furniture and family members, he relocated them to a shelter. As a result of these conflicts and accusations, Will was subjected to a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Summer, and faced penalties and probation amidst further investigations. A fierce battle for custody emerged between the families. The Inmans filed police report against Adam Peters, labeling him a potential threat to the safety of Alex Kelly and Alana. Tragically, Summer's life took a dark turn. On the night March 22, 2011, Summerman, just 25 years old, was finishing her shift at the bank. She wrapped up her cleaning duties after the office had closed. Around 11 p.m., she stepped outside to dispose of the trash. Summer had texted her partner Adam to meet her after work, but he didn't find her by 11:30 p.m. Worried, Adam arrived at the bank and began his search. He discovered her personal items scattered near a dumpster in an alley. Her phone, keys, and a music player still playing with headphones nearby in the grass. Her jacket lay there too. Alarmed, Adam immediately contacted Summer's parents to inform them of her disappearance and stressed the need to alert the police swiftly. Initially, Summer's parents called the bank, guessing she might have stayed longer for extra work, and misplaced her belongings. Security personnel had no clues about her whereabouts. They then contacted Logan police to report Summer missing, emphasizing her punctuality and that she rarely stayed late at work. Police arrived at the scene, where they found Summer's belongings. They heard accounts from 3 eyewitnesses, who saw her abduction about an hour earlier. 2 women out for an evening jog reported seeing Summer as she threw out the trash. At that moment, a white Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, approached. 2 individuals dressed in black balaclavas exited the vehicle and forcefully grabbed Summer, shoving her into the back seat despite her resistance and cries for help. One bystander's attempt to intervene was thwarted when the female driver incapacitated him with pepper spray, forcing him to retreat. The car quickly left the area. The 2 jogging witnesses immediately headed to the nearest police station to report what they had witnessed. Their account initially faced skepticism from the police, who found their narrative peculiar and doubted its authenticity. Expecting it might be a fabricated story. The police reached the abduction site of Summer Inman just an hour after her parents filed the missing person report. However, initial efforts did not lead to locating the missing 25-year-old. News of Summerman's kidnapping quickly circulated through all local media outlets, capturing the community's attention. Hundreds of Logan's residents united in a concerted effort to locate her. As 3 days elapsed, the possibility of finding Summer safe and sound grew increasingly faint. Throughout this harrowing time, her parents endeavored to maintain hope against despairing thoughts. Shortly before her disappearance, Summer Inman shared a photo on Facebook featuring herself, her new partner Adam, and her children. The image portrayed them as a content family unit. Will Inman, who had access to Adam Peters' Facebook page, surprisingly still on his friends' list despite being Summer's current partner, noticed this update. It raises an intriguing question. Why would a husband befriend his wife's new companion? The backstory revealed that Adam, a man without stable employment, had been hired by the Inmans a year earlier, in spring 2010, for various household tasks. It was then that Adam and Summer crossed paths and developed a bond. Despite initial reluctance, Summer eventually reciprocated Adam's affections. Her diary entry reflects this internal conflict. My mind screamed, "Run, get out of here now." But instead I stayed and let him embrace me and then delve deeper. I am very sorry about this. I am guilty. This encounter signified the unraveling of Summer's life within the Inman family. Yearning for happiness and love, she initiated divorce proceedings which were prolonged 5 days before vanishing. Will tested the proposed spousal support per child monthly, suggesting a reduction to $50, given his annual earnings of just $6,000. Will and his parents sought full custody of the children, but their petition was rejected by the court. After losing contact with their grandchildren, Bill and Sandra visibly deteriorated. They lost weight and were clearly affected, as those who knew them concurred that the grandchildren were the light of their lives. In March 2011, amidst the investigation into Summer's disappearance, the Inman family was located. They were found at the residence of Bill's 70-year-old mother in Jackson, Ohio. Bill, Sandra, and Will collectively asserted their ignorance regarding Summer's abduction. The Inmans recounted that on the night of Summer's kidnapping, they were en route to Cleveland to view a new property. However, they encountered car trouble after 3 hours on the road, leading to an overnight ordeal of vehicular repairs on the roadside before returning to Logan the next morning. They maintained that their interactions with Summer were generally amicable with infrequent disputes. Yet they attributed a shift in their familial harmony to Adam Peters' employment in their household, describing this phase as challenging. The trio consistently portrayed Adam as a negative influence, alleging he was the catalyst for the disintegration of their previously harmonious and tightly knit family. The investigation took a crucial turn when police noticed a white Ford Crown Victoria at the Inman family's residence. Upon inspection of the vehicle, a GPS receiver was confiscated. Subsequent examination revealed that on March 22nd, the day Summer was abducted, this car was in Logan. The GPS was deactivated at 5:30 p.m. that evening and reactivated the next morning again in Logan, contradicting the Inman's claim of traveling to Cleveland. Phone records further corroborated that all three family members were in Logan on both March 22nd and 23rd. Additional inquiries revealed that on the morning of March 23rd, around 7:30 a.m., the Inmans were at a car wash engaging in a thorough interior cleaning of the vehicle. Bill, Sandra, and Will were all present, but Summer was notably absent following this event. They visited an auto shop in Cleveland for a tire change. While there, a shop employee noticed something odd. Bill was choosing to replace nearly new tires with used ones, simply because he didn't like his current set changed. There was also evidence that the Inmans attempted to modify the car's appearance. Notably, Bill had removed a police spotlight that had previously been mounted on the driver's side door next to the mirror. Bill, Sandra, and Will Inman were apprehended and brought in for interrogation. Prior to their arrest, Bill assured his elderly mother of their innocence, attributing the situation to a test from the devil. Throughout the questioning, they consistently claimed they were unaware of Summer Inman's abduction and didn't know who the kidnapper was. However, after several hours and faced with the possibility of capital punishment if convicted, Sandra Inman's resolve faltered. Eventually, she disclosed the truth. Sandra confessed that they were responsible for Summer's abduction on the night of March 22nd. She detailed how Bill and Will had disguised themselves in black masks. Sandra admitted that her initial plan was merely to abduct and intimidate Summer. However, events took an unexpected and tragic turn. According to Sandra's confession, when Summer was forcibly placed in the car's back seat, Will restrained her with plastic ties around her neck, hands, and feet, intending merely to frighten her into granting him access to their children. As the situation escalated, Will realized that Summer was on the brink of unconsciousness. He panicked and desperately searched for a knife to release her, shouting frantically to his mother, "Oh my God, Mom, where's the knife? I can't find it." Amidst their collective fear and desperate search for the knife, the situation worsened. Summer ceased breathing and tragically passed away. Sandra maintained that their objective was never to take Summer's life. They merely sought a resolution to their custody dispute and hoped to ensure regular visits with their grandchildren. On March 29, 2011, a week after the kidnapping, Sandra Inman disclosed the location of the body. Summer's remains were found in a septic tank on the grounds of Skinnier Faith Church near Nelsonville, about 30 kilometers from her workplace. Bill Inman had been involved in the church's construction. This place held personal significance for him and Sandra, as it was where they had married 28 years earlier. The Inmans were regulars at this church. Bill participated in its musical ensemble. Police uncovered the well by removing a concrete slab and unscrewing 6 bolts from the metal lid. When they opened it, they immediately saw Summer's legs. She had been thrown headfirst into the septic tank, still wearing her work attire. Her black t-shirt bore an ironic inscription, "I don't have anger issues, I have issues with idiots." A forensic examination confirmed that Summer had succumbed to strangulation. Apart from marks on her neck, hands, and legs indicating she'd been restrained, no other injuries were found on her body. This highlighted strangulation as the cause of her tragic demise. Sandra revealed that she originally planned to dispose of the body in a river, but reconsidered and decided it would be safer to conceal it in the well near the church. She believed this location would ensure it remained undiscovered for a long time. Sandra admitted to feeling deep shame for her actions and their irreversible consequences. During the subsequent trial, 49-year-old Bill Inman and 28-year-old Will Inman did not take any responsibility for Summer's death. Throughout the proceedings, they stayed mostly silent, showing no visible emotions and avoiding eye contact with Summer's grieving parents. Sandra Inman, at 47 years old, stood out as the only family member who accepted responsibility for her part in the tragic events. She maintained that the plan to intimidate Summer was entirely her own idea. In a deeply emotional moment before sentencing, Sandra, overcome with tears, faced Summer's parents and begged for their forgiveness. Her speech, though broken by sobs and a quivering voice, clearly expressed remorse. Sandra admitted she saw Summer as a daughter and regretted her catastrophic decision. In 2012, the verdict was handed down. All three members of the Inman family were convicted. Bill and Will Inman received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Sandra Inman also got a life sentence but with eligibility for parole after serving 15 years. However, among friends and church members familiar with the family's dynamics, doubts arose about Sandra being the mastermind behind the crime. It was commonly known that Bill had a dominant role in the family and usually made final decisions on all matters. Will, on his part, was seen as a pampered child whose desires were always met by his parents. Those close to the family speculated that Sandra's confession might have been a strategic move to reduce legal consequences for her husband and son. Currently, Alex and Alana are being raised by Summer's family. For quite some time, it was hard to explain to these grandchildren where their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather had gone. On February 3, 2003, a hysterical 911 call was made from the mansion of famous record producer Phil Spector. Spector's personal chauffeur made that very call, and he would become a star witness in a case and trial that captivated people all over the world. Born in 1939 in New York, Harvey Philip Spector showed creative talent and a passion for music from a very young age. He quickly began forming bands and learning instruments. While he achieved success with his band, the Teddy Bears, his look drastically changed when he decided to move into producing records. He became a millionaire before the age of 21, and by the 1960s he had 23 records in the top 50. It was also in the 1960s that he signed the band, the Ronettes, to his record label. One-third of the talented trio, Ronnie, fell in love with Spector and they later married. However, the honeymoon phase soon faded. Spector quickly became controlling and abusive towards her. Metal bars were placed over the windows, barbed wire put around the mansion, and he would take her shoes in a bid to prevent her from running away. Ronnie claimed he frequently threatened her life and often pulled guns on her. In her 1990 memoir, she spoke about the years of torment which culminated in her escaping from the house barefoot with the help of her mother. She said, "I knew that if I didn't leave, I was going to die." Multiple witnesses would say, although he was a musical genius, he could also become erratic and volatile and frequently drank heavily during recording sessions. The more he drank, the darker things became, and he would often pull guns out and fire them at walls and ceilings. Despite the personal turmoil, professionally, Spector's career was still on the up. He was collaborating and working with the likes of the Beatles, the Ramones, the Supremes, and the Rolling Stones. He contributed to and produced a vast amount of hit songs, including Rock and Roll High School, Imagine and You've Lost That Loving Feeling. He also created and coined a new music production technique that people would use for years to come known as the Wall of Sound. He had well and truly reached the top of his profession and was highly sought after by various A-list artists. However, during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, Spector took more of a backseat, remaining virtually inactive. Rumors about his wild, bizarre, and troubling personal life began hitting the headlines once more. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame during these decades. 3rd of February 2003. Phil Spector had been driving around LA going on several dates with different women visiting his favorite spots. Over several hours, he spent time at the Grill, Trader Vic's, and Dan Tana's. He had already taken a concoction of pills with a mixture of alcohol, including liquor that was 75% proof. But Spector's night wasn't over, and sometime after midnight he and one of his dates entered the VIP area of the famous House of Blues on Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles. Lana Clarkson was an American actress and model. Born in California in 1962, she quickly showed a spark for the entertainment industry. She was talented, beautiful, and had a lot of passion for performing. People that knew her said she also had great comedic timing, regularly working on her own sketches and stand-up ideas. Lana hoped to be cast in different roles that showed her many talents and versatility as an actress. By the 80s, she was achieving success within the industry. Although playing bit parts, these parts were in big movies and TV shows, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Scarface, Three's Company, and The Jeffersons, to name a few. She was also passionate when it came to helping others. She did a lot of charity work and volunteered weekly for Project Angel Food, which delivered food for those in Los Angeles affected by HIV or AIDS. As she approached her 30s, however, her career started to slow down and she wasn't acting as frequently. She decided to start a website as a way of interacting with her fans. On this site, she sold signed copies of her films as a way of making some extra money and giving her fans something more personal. In 2001, she had a serious accident, breaking both her wrists in 26 places, requiring multiple surgeries. This left her physically unable to carry on any film or commercial work for a long time. After this long break, she struggled even more to get the role she used to, and she began taking part-time jobs to support herself. In early 2003, she took on a new job as a hostess at the House of Blues in West Hollywood, Los Angeles. Many that knew her said this was a clever and strategic decision, as the House of Blues was a popular celebrity hangout. Anybody who was anybody would spend time there, and being a hostess, Lana would regularly be making connections with all manner of powerful people within the industry. On February 3rd, while working in the VIP area, she walked right into one of those powerful people, Phil Spector. Witnesses said that Spector was wearing one of his notorious wigs, and Lana momentarily thought that he was an unknown female trying to get into the exclusive area. At first, she refused to entry, but upon being told he was a famous record producer, she immediately apologized and began showering him with attention and drinks. When Spector's date no longer wanted to participate in the drinking, Spector sent her home. His attention was now firmly on Lana Clarkson. It was very clear to onlookers that Spector was heavily intoxicated by this point and was continuing to drink heavily and spiral further out of control. A few hours later, at around 2:30 a.m., Lana finished her shift and went to go and find her car. She clearly made a good impression on Spector, as after he spotted her in the street, he begged her to come back to his mansion for a drink. The CCTV footage from outside the venue shows Lana getting into Spector's car. Sometime after 3 a.m., Spector's personal driver dropped both Phil and Lana at the back door of the producer's mansion in Alhambra. It was about 40 miles away from the House of Blues. Known as the Castle, this secluded 3-acre house boasted 33 rooms and was Spector's pride and joy. The details surrounding how the next series of events came to be will never be fully known. Just before 5 a.m., Spector's driver Adriano D'Souza heard a loud popping sound. He got out of the car to check it was nothing to do with the vehicle and was getting back into it when he saw the back door slowly open. Phil Spector emerged holding a gun and said, "I think I've killed someone." Upon looking past Spector into the foyer, Adriano saw the legs of Lana Clarkson, and she was slumped in a chair with blood coming from her mouth. Adriano ran down the driveway. He was fearing for his life and knew he needed to call the police. Before he made the call to 911, he left a voicemail on Michelle Blaine's answer phone. Michelle was Spector's longtime personal assistant. Adriano briefly told her what had happened, and he would later say that he didn't know the exact address, and he initially phoned her to ask for it. After backing out onto the streets and confirming the road name, he phoned 911. At around 5:10, police descended on Spector's sprawling property. When the police spotted him, Spector began to retreat and seemingly started to reach for something in his shirt. Worried he might be attempting to arm himself, they tried to use a taser on Spector, but it got tangled in his clothing and didn't work. They then rushed him with a ballistic shield and knocked him to the floor. Other officers ran past to find Lana. It was evident that nothing could be done to save her, and she was already deceased. Near Lana's body was an open drawer containing an empty gun holster. The holster seemed to match the gun lying next to Lana's legs. Although no fingerprints were found on the gun when it was examined, Lana's blood was discovered around various parts of the mansion. In one of the bathrooms, police found a cloth covered in blood. as is blood on one of Spector's jackets hanging in a closet, and more blood was on the stairs. In the main living room, police found an empty bottle of tequila and a cocktail glass with some lit candles. Just after 6 a.m. Spector was brought in for questioning on suspicion of murder, and the arresting officers noted that he reeked of alcohol and was clearly inebriated. Shouting and slurring at the officers, he denied any wrongdoing and claimed that Lana had taken her own life. He said she even kissed the gun before she pulled the trigger. While in jail, he made a phone call to Robert Shapiro, a defense attorney to the stars. Most notably, Robert Shapiro had been part of O.J. Simpson's defense team in the high-profile 1995 trial. Thanks to Shapiro, Spector's bail was set at $1 million, which he quickly made and swiftly headed back to his multi-million-dollar mansion. Following a similar approach he had taken in the Simpson trial, Shapiro began regularly conversing with the media, in a bid to control the situation and present Spector's narrative. In the following months, Spector's PR team also appeared to go into overdrive, and multiple unfavorable stories were coming out about Lana Clarkson. It was alleged that she was depressed at her fledgling career and had just wanted to end it all. A portrait was painted of her as a washed-up B-list movie actress who was struggling to make ends meet. And shockingly, despite no confirmation of this, it was reported by the Los Angeles radio station that Lana had accidentally shot herself. During these months, Spector also made many various bizarre televised interviews telling anyone that would listen that Lana had taken her own life on that fateful night. The autopsy results finally came back. They determined that Lana had died when a single bullet severed her spine. On the 22nd of September 2003, despite Spector's claims of suicide, Lana's death was officially ruled as a homicide. And just a few months later, Phil Spector was formally charged with the death of Lana Clarkson. He pled not guilty and maintained that she had taken her own life. It would be 5 years before the case would enter a courtroom. In March 2007, Spector went on trial for the murder of Lana Clarkson. He was charged with second-degree murder, and it was a media frenzy. Judge Larry Paul Fidler was presiding and allowed the proceedings to be televised. Robert Shapiro was no longer working with Spector, and Leslie Abramson was now in charge. At this point, she was most famous for representing Eric Menendez in the infamous Menendez brothers trial. Leslie and Phil clashed, and they parted ways. While looking for another lawyer, Spector decided to take matters into his own hands and created a website with the intent of putting his version of events to the public. His personal assistant Michelle helped him film these strange and erratic videos. She recalled feeling at the time that something was deeply disturbed about the way he was approaching the situation. After a while of searching for a new attorney, Bruce Cutler took over. However, he too withdrew due to differences of opinions with Spector. This was just days before the closing arguments. Linda Kenny Baden then stepped in and took over for the final part of the trial. This constant hiring and firing of his legal teams also kept setting the trial back a huge amount. During the trial, Spector's love of guns and his history of abusive and manipulative relationships with people fueled the prosecution's case significantly. By this time, multiple women had spoken out against Spector, and many artists and assistants could attest to his erratic and volatile behavior. One of Spector's sons, Gary, said that at no point did he disbelieve anyone's account of how Spector had behaved in the past. He said it even gave him flashbacks as to what it was like to live with him. The star witness in the trial, Adriano de Souza, testified on the stand and had a lot more to say about the limo ride over to the castle. He claimed that Lana was less keen on going back to Spector's mansion, and that Spector kept putting pressure on her to get into the limo. She eventually said she would go back for one drink and then she wanted to leave. This reluctance to go with him in the first place did little to help the defense's case. Spector's defense team painted Lana in a very unflattering light. She was spoken of as someone who seemed desperate to revive an already unsuccessful career, and in failing to do so had slumped into depression, culminating in her taking her own life in Spector's home. On September 10, 2007, the jury began their deliberations. After a week, they came back in a deadlock 7-5. They deliberated further, trying to come to a unanimous decision, but on the 26th of September, the judge declared a mistrial as the jurors were still in the deadlock, this time of 10-2. This was in favor of the prosecution. This ultimately meant that, as they hadn't reached a majority, the whole process would have to start all over again with a new trial. It was a devastating blow for Lana's loved ones and the prosecution. Prosecutor Alan Jackson said he wanted a retrial as quickly as possible. He said he owed it to Lana and her family to see that justice was done. After the trial was over, in a shocking twist, he asked his assistant Michelle if she would marry him. He worried that she knew too much and said he would feel safer if they were married, as spouses don't have to testify against each other in court. Michelle refused. 13 months later, on October 29, 2008, the retrial began. Judge Larry Fiedler was presiding again. However, this time the trial was not televised. Doran Weinberg was now Spector's attorney, and going up against Weinberg for the prosecution was still Alan Jackson. Weinberg argued that the only witness who had been in the vicinity at the time, Adriano de Souza, was continuously giving slightly different versions of the event and how it had played out. Weinberg said that this alone should be enough to acquit Spector. Prosecutor Alan Jackson fired back, arguing that Lana had shown absolutely no signs of suicidal behavior, and it just didn't add up, no matter which way one looked at it. The judge, again, allowed Spector's past history of guns and relationships to be used as evidence during the trial, and witness after witness came forward to attest to these harrowing accounts. The prosecution focused and honed in more on the analysis of the blood, and it was clear that the forensic evidence was overwhelming. The blood splatter analysis shows that there was blood on the back of Lana's hands and wrists. An expert testified that if she was holding the gun herself, this particular position of the blood didn't add up. They said that this indicated that her hands would have been up and near her mouth, with her palms facing outwards, not inwards, as if she was holding a gun. They argued that the placement of her hands appeared to be in more defensive position. Put simply, the blood was on the wrong side of her hands and wrists. The prosecution also said that the blood on Spector's jacket definitively put him within arm's reach of Lana, with his arms pointed at her face. Alan Jackson reminded the courtroom of Lana's terrible accident in which she broke both her wrists. Following the path that the bullet entered her mouth, they knew that the gun would have to have been held in a very specific way. Because of the spiral fracture she had from her accident, she couldn't have physically held the gun in the position it would have had to have been in. They also said that in a 10,000 square foot house, the chances of Lana, who had never been there before, finding a gun from within a drawer seemed totally far-fetched and ridiculous. This same gun, allegedly used to shoot herself, had no fingerprints on it at all. If Lana had been holding it, her should have been there. The prosecution speculated that the way in which Lana's body was found indicated something very significant. Her jacket and shoes were on, and her handbag was across her shoulder. It appeared that she was attempting to leave the property. It was in that moment that Spector felt like he was losing control, and just the same as the other ex-partners described, he reached for the gun in a bid to control the situation. This, along with all of the witness testimonies and the other evidence collected from the scene, showed that the prosecution appeared to have a firmly watertight case. On April 13, 2009, the jury found Phil Spector guilty of second-degree murder. And on May 29, 2009, he was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. In January 2021, Phil Spector died in a prison hospital from complications relating to COVID-19. He was 81 years old and would have been eligible for parole in 2024. Lana Clarkson's passionate, warm, and loving personality lives on through her friends and family. She was a funny and talented woman who had so much more to give and achieve. Her life was cut tragically short, but the memories people have of her continue to keep her vibrant spirit alive. One fateful night on July 22, 1957, two young couples were in a parked car at a lover's lane on Van Ness Avenue in Hawthorne, near El Segundo, California. They were doing what was typical of teenagers. All of a sudden, their vigorous petting came to an end when they were accosted by a young man who was pointing a gun at them through the car's window. All the four teenagers in the car were compelled by their attacker to exit the car and form a lineup. The attacker, who was predicted to be in his early 20s, then ordered the terrified couples to remove their clothing after taking their money and jewelry. At that point, the teenagers could tell that the attacker was not a local by his accent, and it was clear he had been drinking. The gunman obviously wanted the teenager's 1949 Ford sedan. Sadly, that wasn't the only thing the 20-something drifter was after. He also sexually attacked one of the girls after tying the hands of 3 of the victims behind their backs. All 4 victims anticipated being shot because they could all clearly see their assailant's face. Fortunately, the attacker just sped off in their vehicle. The teenagers were alive, but visibly scared to death. Shortly before 1:30 a.m., the stolen vehicle sped through a red light directly in front of 2 on-duty police officers on Rosecrans Avenue and Sepulveda Boulevard. The officers, Richard Phillips and his partner Milton Curtis, immediately overtook the sped-up car and forced the driver to come to a stop. The police were not informed of the crimes that the driver had committed since the car had not yet been reported stolen. Officer Richard Phillips prepared to give him a ticket. The perpetrator ought to have simply accepted the summons and left. Instead, when Officer Phillips turned his back, the driver fired 3 shots at him with the same gun he had used to rob the teenagers. Before Officer Curtis could bring out his firearm, the perpetrator fired another rounds of 3 shots through the window of the patrol car where he sat, striking him. The criminal then left the area, but not before Officer Phillips was able to shoot the fleeing car 3 times with his own gun. 28-year-old Officer Richard Phillips and his 25-year-old partner Officer Milton Curtis both passed away before the ambulance Officer Phillips had called for could arrive. Officer Richard Phillips had served with the El Segundo Police Department for 2 years. He was survived by his wife and 3 children, while Officer Curtis Milton had only served with the El Segundo Police Department for 2 months. He was survived by his wife's son and daughter. Both victims' family was inconsolable. Jane, Officer Curtis' wife, could not stop professing how much she loved him. According to her, they had a misunderstanding before he left for his work shift. Till today, she regrets not having sorting out their issues and saying goodbye properly. Numerous police officers from across the county turned out to try to find the offender, but it yielded nothing. There was not much evidence at the crime scene. The incidents led to the biggest manhunt in California's history as the culprit appeared to have vanished into thin air. Later, the stolen car was discovered nearby, abandoned. In the car, the police only discovered 2 bullets from Officer Phillips' gun, making the police believe that the 3rd bullet likely struck the attacker. A single thumbprint was collected from the steering wheel. This print failed to reveal a culprit for many years. 3 years after the murder, in 1960, Doe Tooley, the owner of Manhattan Beach, a residence close to the crime scene, went to the police station to submit 2 watches and a .22 caliber revolver he discovered while cleaning his property. It was discovered that the watches belonged to the teenagers who were robbed in 1957, and the revolver was the murder weapon. That night in 1957, the attacker is believed to have dropped those things while leaving the stolen car behind. These pieces of evidence discovered provided a vital lead. The serial number of the revolver led police to a Sears in Shreveport, Louisiana, where G.D. Wilson was documented as the buyer's name. The gun, which was the cheapest one the shop sold, cost $29.95. Investigators found that George D. Wilson had rented a room at AYMCA close to the Sears store, but had provided a false Florida address. Police investigated every George D. Wilson they could find for years, but nothing came up. Many years later, in 2002, a certain woman reported to the El Segundo police that her dead uncle had once boasted of killing 2 police officers. Although the claim was a dead end, it reignited interest in the police officer's cold case. The fingerprint from the teenager's car in 1957 was examined by investigators using the recently released automated fingerprint identification system. Surprisingly, there was a match to a man named Gerald Fighton Mason, who was found guilty of burglary in Colombia in 1956. Due to that incident, he had to serve a 1-year term in prison. In addition to matching fingerprints, the evidence also included identical handwriting, which connected him to the murder weapon he used to kill the police officers in 1957. Handwriting analyst Paul Edholm determined that the signatures he had on the IMCA receipt and Sears documents in 1957 were identical to the handwriting on his 1999 South Carolina driver's license application and on a bill of sale for a car. It hadn't changed at all. This was another glaring evidence for the investigators to get to the root of the matter. After the murders, Gerald Mason was a law-abiding citizen for 45 years, never receiving even a parking ticket. He was a wealthy retiree. He was married, had 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren. He lived quietly in a suburban area with his family. He owned 2 gas stations. Friends and neighbors regarded him as being amiable and helpful. Without even the slightest regret for the officer's family, who had lost their loved one so long ago, Gerald Mason was able to enjoy a long and successful life. In the long run, friends and relatives were horrified to learn that he had committed such a heinous murder. On January 26, 2003, the police, who had been watching Gerald Mason for weeks and had seen him playing golf with friends and engaging in other benign pastimes, eventually knocked on his door. Gerald Mason was said to have been shocked and asked them where they were from. The police officers introduced themselves and told him that they were there because of the murders of 2 police officers in 1957. A horrified Gerald Mason responded with, "My God, you're here for that? That happened so long ago. I can't believe you're here bothering me with that." Gerald Mason's scar from a bullet graze wound caused by a gunshot fired by Officer Phillips in 1957 was used to further identify him as the culprit after his arrest. Following Mason's arrest that January, officers executed a search warrant at his Columbia house and discovered another unique 9-shot .22 revolver similar to the murder weapon. Investigators also discovered 3 witnesses who recognized Gerald Mason as the man they had seen the night of the murders based on a photograph taken in 1956. Due to the overwhelming amount of evidence, Gerald Mason confessed to the cops that he had been drinking when he came upon the teenagers. Then, in an effort to hide the rape, robbery, and car theft, he shot both police officers. "I really don't have an explanation for why this happened. I wish I did," Gerald Mason said. When asked about the teenager he had raped, Gerald Mason said he no longer remembered the reason why he had raped the 15-year-old girl. Following his arrest, Jerry Mason Whitaker, Gerald Mason's daughter, said in an interview, "There really aren't words to describe the range of emotions we've gone through. I could not have had a better father." Gerald Mason professed his regrets to the families of Officers Phillips and Curtis during his sentence hearing. "It's impossible to express to so many people how sorry I am. I do not understand why I did this. It does not fit in my life. It is not the person I know. I detest these crimes," he said. The surviving families of the victims did not feel any iota of sympathy for Gerald Mason as they pour out their pains in court. "Cowardly act shattered our lives forever. You caused our mother to become a widow with 3 babies to raise alone," said Carolyn Phillips, Officer Richard Phillips' daughter. The other slain officer's son, Keith Curtis, claimed outside of court that Gerald Mason's in-court apology had not touched him. "Mr. Mason is sorry now, and we heard his apology speech. He wasn't sorry for 45 years, and the only reason we're hearing that apology now is because he got caught," Keith Curtis said. Gerald Mason was given 2 consecutive life sentences with a minimum of 7 years after entering a guilty plea. As part of the agreement, the rape, robbery, and grand theft charges were dropped, sparing Mason's family from hearing about how he had raped a teenage girl, as well as the living victims from having to testify. Gerald Mason's application for parole was denied in 2009. He won't have to appear in front of the panel again for a maximum of 15 years until March 2024, when he will be 90 years old. Prosecutors in California were adamant that he would never be freed. His plea agreement allowed him to serve his prison term close to his family. Thus, he was detained in South Carolina. However, on January 22, 2017, 9 days before his 83rd birthday, Mason passed away in prison. He had served 14 years behind bars. His next parole hearing was 7 years away. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.